Hi everyone, I'm Carol Ann Riddell. It is a big day here on Book It. Actor Anthony Rapp is in our studio to talk about his memoir turned musical, Without You. He is sitting down with our Andrew Falzone. Andrew, take it away.
Thanks very much, Carol Ann. Anthony Rapp, currently starring in Without You at New World Stages. Anthony, thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you.
Here on Book It, even though it's a musical, it all begins with a book, and your musical also began with a book. It focuses on your time in Rent, but also the loss that you suffered during that time, and it was kind of very Dickens. It was a tale of two cities. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
So Rent, initially, the off-Broadway version, before the off-Broadway version, we did a little 10-performance workshop in 1994. My mom had just, right after that, my mom had a recurrence of a cancer that had been a couple of years before. So concurrent with getting into Rent, which then a year later became the off-Broadway and then Broadway, and then this smash hit and everything changed, my mom was ultimately in the last couple of years of her life with her battle with cancer. So yes, the best of times, worst of times, and also Jonathan Larson, who wrote Rent, at 35 years old, died very suddenly and unexpectedly of an aneurysm right after the dress rehearsal of the off-Broadway run. So he didn't live to see his incredible success and how he did, in fact, transform the landscape of musical theater. So these two enormous losses in the middle of this incredibly life-changing event. So they were all life-changing events. The memoir was my attempt to capture that, sort of really focusing on like a 2.5, 3 year period where it was the most intense. And then the show is a further distillation of that.
How does a book that started out as a memoir based in grief really become a celebration of life on stage?
Well, one of the things about performing the story, I think, is that I get to be a living demonstration of one of the central ideas of the book, which is a piece of wisdom that was passed to me by Cy O'Neill, my friend Cy O'Neill, which is the only way out is through. When you're faced with a crisis like this, when it feels like there's no, how do you survive it? You have to go through it to come out the other side, and I feel like by virtue of me being on stage, I'm showing you that that's the case. And Seasons of Love is a song, as Michael Greif described to us on the first day of rehearsal, it's a song that takes place at a funeral, but it's very much about celebration. It's both. And when it's saying it's about celebration, it doesn't mean that you ignore the pain, it doesn't mean that you look away. One of the lyrics of Seasons of Love is, how do you measure a last year on earth? How do you, you look at all these things, including the way that she died. It's not looking away from it. It's looking at it and including it, and also being able to celebrate the love. And grief is commensurate with love. You only grieve things that you loved. You don't, if you lose something you didn't really care about, you don't really feel much grief for it, for its loss. So all of those reasons, I believe, are the reasons that it's a distinct experience, the performance versus a book. But they're both, I hope, meaningful for people.
Something that comes across so beautifully in the book is your early days of collaborating with Jonathan, and how much you wanted to befriend him and you hoped the same thing from him. What was it about him so early on that made you want to collaborate and befriend him? Well,
in theater, I hadn't been around musical composers in quite a while, and to meet somebody he was a little older than I was. He was maybe 10, 12 years or so older than I was at the time. But there was a sort of shared life experience in a way, as opposed to these older people who had, I felt like such a generational gap. So I think that was a connection. We shared a lot of taste in music. And he also was so much, his show is about this, but he as a person struck me as so much about wanting to forge community. He didn't want it just to be a job.
As the show evolved, some songs got dropped and some songs were added. And one of the songs that got added was What You Own, which is your duet with Adam Pascal. And in the book, you write that Jonathan basically said, he kind of wrote that for you with your voice in mind. As an artist and someone who wanted to collaborate with him, what did it mean to you to have him say, this is for you?
I mean, it's an incredible gift. It's something that I'd read about. I believe I might be conflating things, but I believe it's like what Sondheim said about Send in the Clowns.
Sure.
That he wrote that for Glynis Johns. You know, you hear these stories. I have these little dreams that I hadn't even realized were a full dream of like, that would be wonderful if a composer did that for me someday. And then for it to actually happen was incredibly gratifying and a huge honor. And it also makes a certain kind of sense. I understand it too, because if you're a composer and you're writing with someone's voice or their sensibility in mind, how could it not inspire? Same thing with Take Me or Leave Me. He wrote it because he knew Adina and Freddie. So, and to me, they're two of his best songs, and not, partly because he had a voice in mind. He had a way that the song he knew the song could be brought to life in a certain way. I think that helped him write it with even that much more specificity.
Anthony, you've lived a lot of life since Rent, and that includes your most recent role as Commander Paul Stamets on Star Trek Discovery. And you're also one half of the first openly gay couple in Star Trek with Wilson Cruz, who plays Dr. Hugh Culber. Tell me, how did Star Trek come up, and what was your first reaction to getting it?
It came up, I was going to bed. It was like, I don't know, not that late, but East Coast time, bedtime, and West Coast time, still evening. Sure. And I got an email from the West Coast right before I went to bed, as we do in these days. I checked my email on my phone before I put my phone down, and there was this email saying, "Are you interested in being a part of the new Star Trek series?" I didn't know there was a new Star Trek series. It was news to me, and I was like, yeah, I'm interested in being a part of the new Star Trek series. I've been a nerd and a fan of Star Trek and of Lord of the Rings and comic books and Star Wars since I was 6 years old. But I never imagined myself in them. So I was like, yeah, of course. And then, and initially, and this is now, I think I've told the story, but I don't think this is exclusive person thing. But I was initially offered a different role, and they were still looking to cast Stamets. And suddenly they, I don't know, a couple weeks later, they were like, actually, would you like to play this role instead? I was like, of course. Yeah. So, the other initial role was a smaller role. I would have been happy to do that too. But then to be given the gift of the first openly gay character in Star Trek history, and Star Trek, which has broken all these barriers over the years, but that was one barrier they still hadn't broken, at least in the TV series, sure. Was an incredible honor. And then to learn a little, not long after that, that the person playing my partner in the show was going to be my friend and compatriot and Rent alum, sure. Wilson Cruz, was just icing on the cake. So the whole experience has felt like a complete bonus round surprise sure. gift.
My understanding is you and Wilson actually overlapped for about 3 weeks at yes. the tail end of your run and the beginning of his.
Yes, yeah. The original Angel was also named Wilson Germain Heredia, won the Tony. Sure. He left in December of '97, and Wilson Cruz had been doing it on tour, came in as his first replacement right before it was about 3 weeks before I then left, yeah.
Wonderful. Well, you guys make a lovely on-screen couple, I'll tell you that much. Let's take a look at Anthony Rapp and some of his co-stars in Star Trek Discovery on Paramount+.
Adira can write an algorithm that can find and decode it.
How long will that take?
Not more than a few hours. She's pretty fast.
Update me the moment you have something, Commander.
Of course.
They're fast. They, not she. I've never felt like a she or a her, so I would prefer they or them from now on.
Okay.
Well, when you lost me, what did you want people to say to you?
It's not nearly the same thing.
Grief is grief. And everyone moves through it differently. Let book guide you.
Are you sure? Things have been seriously awkward with him since he jumped Discovery to the dilithium planet.
Just trust your instincts.
Pretty poignant stuff, pretty on point. What has it meant to you to be part of these inclusivity arcs in a franchise that has such a fan following?
Well, I mean, it's meant the world to me. It's like, I feel like Wilson and I have been out for decades, so it's been part of our life's work. So the chance to get to do it as part of my life's work creatively, artistically, as well as using my public platform to do so is an incredible feeling to get both in such synergy. And then, especially right now, trans people and non-binary people are under such attack. To be able to do what we can to try to continue to shine a light and uplift their stories and their humanity means everything to me. And Blue Del Barrio, who plays Adira, is young now, mid-20s, but part of this younger generation that is just such incredible trailblazers in terms of how they all are demanding to be seen for who they are. And they're standing on the shoulders of all the work that went before them, but now we feel like, Wilson and I feel like we're standing on their shoulders of how much more they're insisting on being seen. So to be a part of that conversation, be part of that change making in the world is really amazing.
Well, it's funny you mentioned those two folks because we actually asked them what they thought about doing those storylines with you, and let's take a look at what they had to say.
Oh my goodness.
It's meant the world to me to portray the first queer couple in all of Star Trek franchise history with my dear friend of almost 30 years, Anthony Rapp. We were two of maybe a handful of people in the 90s who were openly gay actors. He inspires me every day to be the best actor I can be, to be the best advocate I can be. I'm grateful for his friendship more than anything. I love you, Anthony.
Aunt Tony, your mentorship, your allyship, your friendship, your presence in my life has changed it for the better in more ways than I am ever going to be able to tell you. To me, you are the perfect mentor. You are the embodiment of hard work and love and truth will get you exactly where you need to be in life.
Oh my goodness.
Well, I know I could feel the love. Something tells me you felt the love too. Your thoughts on their thoughts?
Well, I mean, Wilson has said many things over the years like that. I always appreciate the warm, kind things he said, but to hear Blue express it so directly, and especially regarding mentorship, because mentorship means a great deal to me, and I think so often of my mentors, and I've tried to pass the torch a bit, and to hear that it's been passed in that meaningful way is really, really incredibly moving. I'm very grateful.
One of the things that came across to me with Star Trek Discovery is that activism can take different forms. Sometimes it's a march, sometimes it's a sign. But a lot of the nuance of Discovery, it was so subtle. There are scenes that tell a whole story. You and Wilson brushing your teeth together. The pronoun scene that we just saw with Adira. When you look back of all the scenes that you've done with those inclusivity arcs, are there any that stand out in your mind in particular that you're particularly proud of?
Well, those two scenes really, the toothbrush scene, it was especially meaningful because it's such a subtle and direct way of telling the story that these two men are together without signposting, without like making any sort of big deal about it. And we didn't know how it was going to be received. We hoped that it would be received in the sort of best spirit, and it exceeded all of our hopes and expectations. And part of what people did respond to was that simplicity and directness, and how much people felt they were being seen by that. And yeah, with the pronouns, I mean, over and over and over again, and I'm sure Blue gets even more than I do, but on social media, people saying how much that scene, how much it helped them in their families, with their parents, or the parents with their children. And this is anecdotal, so these are just like the people who reach out on social media. I have to believe that's, these few drips, the ripples just continue to extend and extend and extend. So I'm intensely proud of those scenes. And then we were also, Wilson and I have had, I don't know exactly how many kisses. We've never had a make out, but we've had a number of kisses, and we were certainly very aware also the first time that there was a kiss. That was we were very aware of the first, the Uhura Spock kiss, like that was a very big deal, first interracial kiss on network television. Sure. Not that ours was the first, same-sex kiss on television, but it was the first same-sex kiss in Star Trek. And the crew was also aware of it and appreciative of it. Like there was just a regard for that moment, that this was a trailblazing moment. And it wasn't like huge fanfare, but just like, yeah, let's mark this. This is special.
Anthony, thank you so much for joining us here on Book It. We appreciate you coming in today. We'll send it back over to Carol Ann.
Thanks, Andrew. Now to my conversation with CUNY professor and author Helen Phillips. She stopped by the studio recently. We chatted about her latest novel, The Need, and about writing, teaching, and the beautiful, messy business of raising kids. Helen, thank you so much for being here today.
It is such a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So you are an award-winning author. You're an associate professor at Brooklyn College. You are a mom. You're undeniably busy, so I appreciate your making the time.
Of course.
You have written now 5 books with another coming out next year, is that right?
Correct.
So before we talk about, congratulations, first of all.
Thank you.
But before we talk about your most recent book, The Need, which I read and really enjoyed, I want to touch a little bit on your writing generally. I read in an article that you wrote for the New York Times in which you said that becoming bald as a child in some ways helped you pivot towards your choice to become a writer. Can you explain that?
Yes, so from the age of 6, as soon as I could tell a story, I wanted to start telling stories. But then when I was 10 years old, 11 years old, I lost all of my hair due to the autoimmune condition alopecia. And at that time, which felt very like a crisis in my life, I really turned to writing as a place of comfort and solace, and I felt like I could express myself there, express some of the loneliness that came with that. And then but I wore wigs and scarves for many years. I felt self-conscious about my appearance. But then the exact same week that my first book, And Yet They Were Happy, was published, I decided that it no longer felt natural to cover my head with scarves because I had exposed myself so much in my writing. Yeah. So my alopecia is very connected to my writing in that way.
That week with your first book, boy, that must have been very liberating on a lot of fronts.
It was liberating to walk around the streets of New York without anything on my head. Also, I had always worried that people would make comments, but in New York, mostly people say nice haircut.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because New York, everybody looks every sort of way. And to have my first book out and to feel like I was sharing myself so deeply was frightening and vulnerable, but also an amazing experience.
So let's talk now about The Need, which is your most recent book. It centers around the main character, Molly, who is a mom of 2 young children, and she's also a paleobotanist. So for people who have not read the book, might not be familiar with it, can you just briefly explain how the story unfolds? And I also got to ask what a paleobotanist does.
Yes, I didn't quite know what a paleobotanist was myself before I started the book, but a paleobotanist studies plant fossils as opposed to animal fossils. And so a lot of Molly's work hinges on this task of unearthing fossils of plants. But the book begins with Molly home with her 2 young children, and she hears an intruder in the other room. Her husband is away on tour, and she has to confront this issue of what is she going to do as a woman alone with 2 young children. Then, as it turns out, the intruder has quite a shocking identity that is revealed to her, and the intruder knows far too much about her life, and it all goes downhill from there, you could say.
You dedicated the book to your sister Catherine, whom I know you lost some years ago. She'd been ill as a child. I'm sorry about that. Can you tell us a little bit about how she influenced you in this book?
Yes, it is emotionally very personal, this book, even though obviously these events did not happen to me because they are fantastical, but so my daughter was born in June, and then 8 weeks later, my sister died.
Oh my gosh, Helen.
So right as I had this tiny baby, and it was in the rush of that early maternal love and breastfeeding and changing diapers and falling in love and also having sleepless nights, I was at the same time going through the experience of losing my sister and also watching my parents lose their firstborn daughter when I had just received my firstborn daughter. And so it was a very, very intense time in my life, and it at times felt hard to bear all of that, the new life and the death at the same time. So this book was really an effort to explore two women who are going through those dueling experiences.
And I listened to an interview that you gave at one point, and you talked about the dual love and dread of motherhood, which I thought was very apt. But can you explain a little bit more what you meant by that?
Well, when you love something so much, you have so very much to lose. And that's true in any kind of love, but with maternal love, you also are, or any kind of parental love, you are tasked with protecting that person. And that is a weighty responsibility to care for another human in that way and to usher them not only to adulthood, but really for all the rest of your days on the earth that you overlap.
How much did you draw on your own experience as a parent to write the book?
For those parts that were really about the day in, day out experience of having two young children, I did very much draw on my own life. And I was writing the book when I had a 1.5-year-old and a 3-year-old. I would always try to squirrel away 1 hour a day, and I would just try to use that time to capture some of those images or capture some of those physiological sensations. And some of it is so blissful and so delightful. And then 1 second later, it will become so frustrating and so hard. And it just teeters like that. And I really wanted to, even now it's fading from me. My children are 10 and 8, and I don't feel that way anymore.
Right.
It's easier in that way.
Well, if it's any consolation, they get bigger and their problems get bigger too.
That's what I've heard. Little kids, little problems, big kids, big problems.
Yeah, they'll still need you. You've also written about body image and about the potential, the habit of us, those particular of us who are women, to be self-critical. So how has that journey sort of evolved for you? I think it's such a work in progress for so many of us, even the most confident among us.
Well, I can't think about that question without thinking about the experience of being a bald woman in a society where hair is so connected to femininity and to beauty. And so because of that life circumstance, I had to find ways to define my appearance or take joy in my appearance in a way that was unconventional. And I think that that's a good exercise to, though it was very challenging at times, to say, okay, I'm a different, I look different, and that is okay.
And a great thing to pass on then to our children.
I hope that I'm a model for my daughter, especially, both of my children, but especially my daughter. I once asked her, if you do ever lose your hair like I did, how would you feel? And she said, well, I'd feel fine because I see you and I know that it's fine.
Wow. I want to talk a little bit about your role as a professor. So you teach creative writing at Brooklyn College. You also went to Brooklyn College. You had your MFA there, right?
Yes, I am all CUNY. I am MFA from CUNY, and I've stuck around ever since, and now I am a professor.
Well, we love to hear that. So how does working with students inform you as a writer?
It informs me in so many ways. One way I would say is that it keeps me honest, because if I'm encouraging them to write, if I'm encouraging them to believe in the power of their words, I feel like I have to walk the walk as well. And so I will keep up my commitment to be doing my daily writing practice. It really flows back and forth, and I feel so grateful to my students.
We mentioned this at the beginning of the interview, but I understand that you have a new book coming out next year. So is there anything you can tell us, a little sneak peek?
It's called Hum, and it is about I would say my themes of my books are usually whatever I'm most concerned about. This one is about artificial intelligence and climate change, but it's about a family, a woman who, in order to make money for her family, gets her face modified in an experiment so that she won't be recognized by surveillance cameras.
Oh my gosh.
That's the starting place.
Wow, it sounds so interesting.
I hope so. I've certainly had a fun time writing it.
Thank you so much for all this time, Helen. I really enjoyed talking with you.
Thank you so much. A pleasure to be here.
Next up, our regular segment, Uncensored. Award-winning columnist and author Linda Stacy is back, and as always, she's got plenty to say about what she's reading.
Thirst for Salt is a novel by Australian writer Madeleine Lucas. It revolves around a nameless 24-year-old woman adrift in life who meets Jude, a man 18 years her senior, while she's on vacation with her hippy-dippy mother. The young woman, who remains unnamed even though she's the narrator of the story, meets Jude while swimming in the ocean. He swims up near her and calls her shark bait because she hasn't been protecting herself properly. At first, this seemed like a funny pickup line, well, if you can pick up someone in the middle of the ocean. However, as the story progresses, she still isn't given a name. It just seemed a little misogynistic to me. Not on Jude's part, but on the writer's part. The story of their relationship, told through memories of her long-ago love affair with Jude, is sparked years after their breakup when Sharkbait looks him up online. Seems that Jude had finally gotten married and has a child. She hasn't. She recalls their affair, how she moved from the city to live with him in his tiny seaside cabin. They make love, they cook, they adopt a dog, a metaphor for the child they won't have together. Lucas is one of those novelists who doesn't use quotation marks, which apparently signals serious literature. For me, it's just annoying. The book is really about a woman girl who wants to be taken care of, doesn't think much of herself, although she thinks obsessively about her guy. Speaking of old-fashioned portrayals of women, let's take a look at Malibu Rising by mega best-selling author Taylor Jenkins Reid. The book is about Nina Riva, a surfer and supermodel of the 1980s, and her family from the 1950s. Nina's father is Mick Riva, a world-famous crooner/womanizer, who's a minor character in the author's previous book, The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. The women in this book, while stronger than Sharkbait, rely way too much on men. Nina's mother, June, for example, not only gets dumped once, but twice by the star crooner, and she's left to raise the baby he fathered with another woman. Mick eventually returns, declaring his undying love, only to leave her and their 4 kids yet again for another woman. The same thing happens to her famous surfer supermodel daughter, Nina, who marries the world's biggest tennis star. He leaves her for another woman, then shows back up again at Nina's annual star-studded super party to publicly declare his undying love. Fortunately, it doesn't end the same way as her mother. That Nina's house burns down that same night is no spoiler, since it's the first event of the book, and a metaphor for stardom, I think. Yeah, this is a girly beach read, but still there's a chance that it might stick to you like Sharkbait. For Uncensored, I'm Linda Stacy.
That is our show for today. Thanks so much for joining us. A quick reminder to check us out on Facebook and Instagram. We'd love to hear from you, especially if you disagree with Linda. I'm Carol Ann Riddell. See you next time on Book It.